So welcome now to the first of our online conference sessions. We'll be now formally starting the conference, and the topic we're looking at, the first, is on improving quality in live chat and email, and it's certainly proven to be, in terms of registrations, the most popular of the conference so far. So, or in terms of bookings, the most of our sessions. And delighted to welcome back two people who've spoken before on our conferences. Welcome back Neil Martin from The First Word. Neil, if people aren't familiar with The First Word, what sorts of things do you do?
Well, we help people in contact centres to write more like real people and less like the robot that you can see on our wall behind us. So we help with everything from letters, emails, live chat, instant messaging, text message, any time where people are writing to their customers, we help them to do it in a human way. And we also do things like helping with quality assessment. So that's what I'm going to be talking to everyone about today.
Excellent. And also delighted to welcome Sandeep Bogan from Puzzle. Welcome, Sandeep. And you're going to be looking at some of the ways that technology can help improve quality on digital channels.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to look at how technology can be leveraged to improve quality, and that's kind of a theme that we're coming across quite often now at Puzzle.
Excellent. So if you want to watch replay, this will be available later on after the webinar. callcenterhelp.com/recorded webinars. It's now's the time to log into our chat room, and the address here is callcenterhelp.com/chat. And what a lot of people find, it's quite useful to have the chat room on one side of the screen and have the webinar slides on the other side. They're not integrated, unfortunately, but you can get the two running side by side, so you can discuss, ask questions with other members of the audience. There's an added advantage being in the chat room in that you can download the webinar slides. Just follow this link here and you can get both Neil's and Sandeep's presentation. And there is an added advantage of being in that you can ask questions if you'd like to use #question. If you've got a question or if you've got a tip, we have either a bottle of champagne or a box of chocolates or an Amazon gift card for the winning tip, which I will announce at the end of the session. And we're just asking the question in the chat room: which channel gives you the highest quality scores? Is it voice? Is it email? Is it live chat? Or is it video? And be quite interesting to see the results and some of our preliminary discussions in the chat room. It looks like both voice and live chat scoring well, probably more people mentioning voice, but we'll come back to that in a short while. And just want to launch a quick poll, and that is, which attributes do you measure on digital channels? Perhaps if you pick the top three from this list, is it speed of response? Is it spelling and grammar? Is it friendliness? Is it advisor empathy? Or is it compliance? So perhaps pick the top three from this. Which attributes do you measure on digital channels? Neil, do you think, which ones do you think will likely come out high on this one?
I definitely think, well, sadly, I think that compliance will be up there, I think, and speed of response. I'd like to see advisor empathy and friendliness being up there as well. But I think speed of response and compliance, yeah.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the results here. Sample size of 190, so I'll just share the results with you all. And yeah, perhaps not surprisingly, speed of response comes up very high on there with compliance. But I think the good news on that is that a lot of the other things, such as advisor empathy, certainly gets a very high score. In fact, there's almost very little difference between friendliness, advisor empathy, and compliance. And perhaps, Sandeep, what's quite surprising, spelling and grammar is probably the bottom one on that list.
Yeah, it is. But I think, as we've mentioned earlier, with conversations in WhatsApp and some of the messaging platforms, I think the people are kind of, I don't know if they're becoming immune to good spelling and grammar, and they're just kind of more concerned with getting a response and the right response.
Mm.
Yeah, perhaps it is perhaps a more informal type of approach. So let's have a look at some of the quality channels which we've got. Andrew says it's voice. Michael says it's voice. Santej also says it's voice. Voice helps to identify the emotion as per the human touch, but live chat is the next best on there. Ulrika says we use a lot of templates for our emails, and so those emails also get quite good quality scores. Let's have a look. Christine says voice. Orla says voice as well, and Lisa says email then voice, and Kim says live chat scores well for us as well. So Neil, quite a range overall.
Yeah, and it may come down to how well each of these organisations are doing on those channels. I think, you know, you can score really well on email. I think it's harder, but if you get things like templates right, but as long as you personalise them every time, then that's going to make your email score go up. So I really think it's the way that you do it a lot of the time rather than the channel itself.
Well, let's have a look at drill down into that, and it's probably, Neil, it's a good time to start with your presentation. I think you're going to be starting with a poll.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, and do you want to introduce your poll?
Yes, I would. So what I'd like you guys to all think about, please, is how well do your quality scores match up with your customer satisfaction scores? So I'm guessing that everyone today does both of these things in some way. So internally you measure your quality with a quality assessment, a scorecard, and then also you probably have CSAT or some kind of customer satisfaction. You don't have to think about the scores in too much detail, just think about that in general terms. And then your options are, your quality scores are much higher than customer satisfaction. Your quality scores are a bit higher than customer satisfaction. There's a good match between the two, or quality scores are lower than customer satisfaction. Quality scores are much lower than customer satisfaction. So they're your options. And be instinctive about it. You probably have a good sense about what the answer is here.
Okay, well, let's just share the results with you. The sample size of 200. And indeed, it's quite interesting. Only about a third of the audience say there's a good match between the two.
Right. Yeah.
And it seems to be about evenly split of which one is higher and which one is lower.
Yeah, this is quite typical actually, because in theory, you know, we should be getting, you know, 100% on a good match between the two, because your quality scores should tell you exactly what your customers are saying, and if they're not, then there's some kind of disparity. But I think people are just being honest here, so thanks everyone, in that actually those things don't really match.
Indeed, yeah. So I think there was quite a big disparity of, I think, 13% and 11%, where it was whereas much higher or less. So perhaps, Neil, if you'd like to put your slides up on the screen.
Yeah. Okay, we can see these. Great. So we've just talked about this question. So how well do your QA scores match up to your customer satisfaction scores? And this is one of the questions that we at the First Word always ask our clients. And it's amazing how many times these two things don't actually match up. Internally, our clients are doing one thing, but actually their customers are telling them another. And so what that says to us is that in some way their quality assessment isn't working as well as it could be. And there are lots of reasons for that. They're not always intentional, obviously, but it does happen. So I'm going to take you through an example now. What I'd like you to all do is read through this email, which went from a rail company, which shall remain nameless, to a customer. I'm going to read it out loud for you so you can really hear the tone, and I want you to tell me what you think it scored. And I'm just putting up this rail company's scoring system at the bottom. It's a simple traffic light system, green, amber, red. It's what lots of quality assessment score sheets use. So green is customer feels happy and confident, amber is customer not satisfied, and red is customer annoyed and at risk of contacting us again. So that's their way of scoring this. So the email goes, "It was concerning to learn of the circumstances which prompted your contact to this office. To reduce fare evasion, it is our policy that all passengers must be in possession of a valid ticket to travel before they board our trains. Whilst it does say in the National Conditions of Carriage that it's a customer's responsibility to check their tickets, occasionally mistakes occur, and realistically the error was caused by ourselves. A cheque to the value of £30 is enclosed to cover the cost of the ticket." So I'm reading this with my customer hat on, or if I'm the customer, I'm not very happy here. There's no real empathy, there's jargon, it sounds like the terms and conditions, it's quite begrudging. Even though we get £30, it's not to write at the bottom, it's the last sentence. So as a customer, I'm not happy, I'm not satisfied. So what do we think this scored, green, amber or red? So first of all, if you think it scores green, please do contact us as soon as possible, because this really shouldn't be scoring green. I think it should score amber or red. What did the train company think? It scored green. They scored it green. So when we first started talking to this rail company, alarm bells were ringing, because this really shouldn't score green. So that tells us that there is a big difference between the way that they quality assess their own emails and live chats and what customers think. So we asked to see their quality scores after reading this email and emails like it, to tell us what they were like. So we wanted to see how well they were doing. You can see we've got November, December, January, February results here, and they're scoring really well. 97%, 91% in December, 93%, 95%. So you would expect that everything is going brilliantly. Their emails and live chats are doing everything customers want. So then we asked them, well, okay, that's great. Can we see your customer satisfaction score so we can compare them? And this is what they sent us. Quite a difference. You don't even really need to see the specific scores to see that they are about half of what their quality scores are. So these are the customer satisfaction scores as they've written post interaction. So 48%, 51%, 52%, 53%. So they're telling themselves a different story to what their customers are telling them here. So no poll here, but just a question that I want you to think about and maybe pose it in the chat room. Give us your thoughts. So what are the problems with quality assessment? Why do we get results like this? Because quality assessment is a really good thing to do, but often it goes wrong. So let us know your thoughts in the chat room. Here are some of the things that we see very frequently that are problems with quality assessment. So vague, it's not linked to coaching. The actual scorecard itself can be quite boring or even confusing in the way that it's written. We've got this big word in the middle, which is subjective, and I think that is one of the most difficult things about quality assessment, is you can try and be consistent, but actually often quality assessment just comes down to the person who's running it and their opinion. It can be difficult, too long, a bit generic, formulaic, and right at the bottom here, which is what I'd like to talk to you guys today about, is asking the wrong questions. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So here is something that might look familiar to you. This is a typical quality assurance framework. So very serious. Looks like a legal document. I can tell you that this quality assurance framework, this is from the finance industry. It was about 80 pages long. So not really an easy read and not something that you can just pick up and apply on a normal day. We know that also that this changes a lot, because if you look at the bottom, it's got a change history. This document is subject to formal change control and will be reviewed and updated at least annually. So it's not even really a fixed document. There are 7 people's names on the front of it, all who have various levels of approval. So immediately we're looking at this going, this is not going to be easy to use. Here are some of the questions in that quality assessment. You can see they come under tone and style. I've simplified the questions for the sake of this presentation, but they all did exist. Alongside things like that we talked about earlier, compliance and speed of response and regulations. This is what they asked about, tone and style. And they sound, on the surface, quite sensible questions. So 1, was the customer's name used? 2, were all issues covered? 3, was an expression of empathy used? 4, was an apology offered? And 5, was ownership taken. So all things that we'd want to see in any email or live chat or even letter. When we're writing, we want our customers to see these things. But there is a problem with these questions, and I'll show you what that is. Because whenever we see questions like this in a quality assessment, we ask our own question, and that is, could a robot pass your quality assessment? And I want you guys to all think about this as well and do your own test. Because really, if you've got human beings writing to your customers, they're writing emails, letters, live chats, you don't want it that a robot could actually do their job. And so therefore a robot shouldn't be able to pass your quality assessment. And we're not talking about a sophisticated robot like Alexa here. We're talking about this kind of robot that you can see on the screen. So let's do that test. So we're going to go back to the rail industry for this one, and here's an example of an email that Mrs. Hanley has written in to a rail company. So I'll read this out so we can again hear how she's feeling. So, dear Sir, Madam, I'm writing to complain about my recent journey from King's Cross to Darlington. There was no trolley service on the train. London to Darling is 3 hours, and that's a long time without a cup of tea, especially after I made the journey to King's Cross in the snow, which we all remember recently. That was bad enough, but the main reason I'm writing to complain is the 50-minute delay to the service. It meant that I missed my connecting train, and I had to stand outside for another 45 minutes while I waited for the next one. This was very frustrating and turned what should be an easy journey into an uncomfortable one. I'm 72 and my knees do not like being in the cold. Signs off, Mrs. Hanley. So Mrs. Hanley's not had a good experience, so she's written in to complain. So let's imagine that our robot writes back to Mrs. Hanley. And this is what he says. Hi, Pamela. I'm sorry you felt the need to complain. Your journey has been reviewed and a trolley service was not operated on this service due to a staff shortage. The delay was due to slow running rolling stock ahead of the train. I note your dissatisfaction with the service received and apologise for any inconvenience caused. In recognition of the delay to this service, please find enclosed rail vouchers to the value of £50. Yours faithfully, Robot. So, a very robotic response. Formulaic. We have £50, which we can be happy about, but again, it doesn't appear till the end. Lots of stock phrases in here, no real empathy. So, and a robot really could write this response. It's generic. It's a cut and paste job. So, Mrs. Hanley is not going to be happy with this. So our quality assessment shouldn't be either. Our quality assessment should not say that this is a good response. So let's go back to those questions in the quality assessment. So they all sound like good things to ask. Let's see how they come out when we apply them to Mrs. Hanley's email. So first of all, question 1. Was the customer's name used? Well, it looks like Robot has dug into the files and found out that Mrs. Hanley's first name is Pamela. So if we take this question at face value, we've got to say, yes, the customer's name was used. Does Mrs. Hanley want to be called Pamela? Hi, Pamela. She didn't write that in her email, so the chances are no. But because we've asked this question, we have to give the robot a yes. 2, were all the issues covered? And this is something that's really, really common in quality assessments. There is a real need to make sure that we've answered all the questions, and that's good, but it doesn't go far enough. So there were 2 issues in this email, and one was the lack of a trolley service, and 2 was a delay. Did the robot answer them? Well, yes, he has covered both of the issues. Whether he's covered them in the way that Mrs. Hanley wanted is another question. Number 3, was an expression of empathy used? Well, normally we need to see empathy at the beginning, because that's where we need to show that we've really listened to our customer. But technically speaking, I am sorry you felt is an expression of empathy. It's not necessarily genuine, it's not necessarily sincere, but it is an expression of empathy. So again, if we ask this question, we have to give the robot a point here. Number 4, was an apology offered? Just want you to look through this email and see if there's an apology in it. It's not at the beginning where it should be. If you look into the last paragraph, there it is. Apologise for any inconvenience caused. So although, again, it might not be very sincere, it is in there. And number 5, was ownership taken? What's the word that we need to use to show ownership? Well, one word, an important word, is I. And again, the robot has actually used the word I. You can see at the top there, I am sorry, and I note your dissatisfaction with the service received. So again, we have to give the robot a point here, because was ownership taken? Well, yes. So, question is, did the robot pass? So we all read that and thought, Mrs. Hanley is not going to be happy with that. There's no real empathy. It doesn't really show that it's listened to her. But if we take those questions, then we have to say, yes, the robot did pass that test, because we were asking the wrong questions. So the trick here, and it's the same with email or live chat or voice, when you're looking for these human elements and you want to make sure that you score them consistently and accurately, is to ask better questions. So I'm going to show you one way of doing that. So first of all, question 1, instead of was the customer's name used, which is really simple for the robot to pass, whatever name he uses, as long as it's genuinely that customer's name, we can ask, did you address the customer how they want to be addressed? So let's go back to our letter. Little clue, she signed off as Mrs. Hanley, so that's her telling us that that's how she wants to be addressed. So number 1, did you address the customer how they want to be addressed? Well, no, because she hasn't said that we can call her Pamela. Someone else might, that might be fine, but she hasn't said that. Question 2. So instead of were all the issues covered, a better question is, did you answer all the points in order of importance to your customer? Now, Mrs. Hanley only had 2 issues that she was raising with us, but what if she had 5 or 6 or 7? The chances are that not all of those will be of the same importance to her. And you'll all know this, when customers write in or they call in, they'll have a rant and they'll describe things chronologically from beginning to end. And it might not be until the very last paragraph that they tell us what's really important. And what was important of those 2 issues to Mrs. Hanley? Was it the trolley service or was it the delay? Well, really it's the delay. I mean, yes, it's nice to have a cup of tea on the train, but what she's really bothered about is the delay. But the first thing that the robot picks up on here is the trolley service, because the robot is robotically just matching everything that this customer has said, like like a tick list. So here we can see it highlighted. We've got the trolley service not operated, then the delay, and then a really, really important bit of information right at the bottom is the £50. And I think that's too late. Mrs. Hanley, I don't think she's writing in here because she wants money, although she might be, but she's probably interested in it, so let's put that up front. Question 3. Was an expression of empathy used? Well, we saw that technically, yes, the robot did use a very generic expression of empathy. So a better question is, did you show empathy by reflecting back their experience? Now, customers give us all kinds of clues about how they felt and what their experience was, and we can use that when we're writing back to them. And here's just a couple of things that Mrs. Hanley said. So the first one was, I missed my connecting train. Another one was, I'm 72 and my knees do not like being in the cold. She said lots of other things. And if we reflect those things back, then she knows that we've listened to her. And a robot or a template can't do this. Only people can do this. So even if you do use templates, you need to be personalizing them so that your customer knows a real person has dealt with their complaint or their query. So, did you show empathy by reflecting back their experience? So we're looking at you here, robot. I'm sorry you felt the need to complain. That's not reflecting back. Anything really specific about what Mrs. Hanley told us. Question 4, was an apology offered? Well, there was a really poor attempt in that email. It was a non-apology really, but it still passed. So a better question is, if we made a mistake, did you say sorry sincerely upfront? And the key words here are sincerely and upfront, because if we don't do those two things, the apology means nothing. We go back to our email. Did you say sorry sincerely upfront? No. All we say, so first of all, it's not upfront, it's right at the bottom, and it's not sincere. And there is one word in here that really, really undermines it. And I just want you to have a look at the words that are highlighted in red here and pick out which one you think it is. I think we can definitely use a better word than inconvenience. We could reflect back something that she said, but the word that undermines all of this is any, because that implies there is some doubt that we don't believe her, that we know that she was caused inconvenience and frustration and that she missed her connecting train. So it's not any, it's the. So go ahead and just ban that word from any apologies that you make. Also, may. Question 5, was ownership taken? Well, it was in parts, but actually a better question is, did you take ownership for what you did? And let's have a look. So yes, the word I is used, but when it comes to what the advisor actually did, there isn't any ownership. I'll show you where that is. It's in the second sentence. Your journey has been reviewed and a trolley service was not operated on this service. Who's reviewed it? We don't know. A trolley service was not operated. Who didn't operate it? There's no ownership here. We're using what's called the passive, and I'll explain more about that shortly. So, with our better questions, did the robot pass? Well, no, 0 out of 5. So even though we were assessing the same areas like empathy, apology, covering all the right issues, by asking better questions, then we give this email the score it really deserves, which is 0 out of 5. So one of the really key things about quality assessment is not just writing it down and producing a scorecard and lots of criteria. It's training your people to be able to apply it and ask those questions so that they know what they're looking for and they can explain it to their team. So it might be your team managers who do quality assessment. It might be champions. Whoever does it, make sure that they really understand what they're looking for. So I'm just going to pick up on one point, from the last 5 questions that can be quite difficult to spot unless you know what you're looking for. And it's called active verbs. And anyone who saw me on the last webinar with Call Center Helper will remember this. So I'm going to go through it again because it can be quite difficult, but it's really useful if you can spot it. And I'm going to give you a trick for spotting ownership and active writing. So what we want to avoid is the passive. I'm sure some of you know what passive language is. Politicians love the passive. Why? Because it gets them out of trouble. It means they don't have to take responsibility for things they've done. And here we've got Bill Clinton, hands in the air, saying mistakes were made. This is what Bill Clinton said when he was caught doing something he shouldn't with Monica Lewinsky. And I'll leave it there. You probably know what I'm referring to. What's he not saying in this sentence? What keywords isn't he saying? Well, it's I. He's not saying I. So he can distance himself from the mistake, not take any ownership. And this is called passive. If you are a bit of a word nerd like we are here and you Google mistakes were made, you'll find a list of politicians who've used this phrase to deny any ownership or responsibility. So I'm going to give you a way to spot passive and active writing when you're doing quality assessments. And it's this: if you can put the words by robots at the end of a sentence, it's passive. If you can't put by robots at the end of a sentence, it's active. So I'm going to run through some examples now. The first one is from our email. So the by robots test. Have a look at this sentence. Can you put the words by robots at the end? So your journey has been reviewed. Yes, you can. Your journey has been reviewed by robots, so that means it's passive. There's no ownership. What's the active version? How do we add ownership to this sentence? I reviewed your journey. So we instinctively believe this because a real person is involved. It's a bit like if I said, £10 will be received next week. That's not as believable as if I say, I will pay you £10 next week. So the I makes a big difference. So let's do another by robots test. All complaints are taken seriously. All complaints are taken seriously by robots, passive. So if you're wondering why this standard cliche phrase doesn't go down well with your customers and they don't believe it, it's probably this, because it's passive. What's the active version? Well, it's not I in this case, because we're talking on behalf of a team or a company. We take all complaints seriously. That's active. So a really quick and easy way to spot whether your teams are taking ownership in their writing. So what you're looking for is the verbs, the things that describe what people have done, and then do the by robots test, and you'll see whether they're taking ownership or not. So I hope what this has helped you to do is question your own quality assessments. What I'd like you to go away after this webinar and do is do the robot test. Could a robot pass your quality assessment? What kind of questions are you asking? If you just use standard templates all the time, would it get a tick in the box for your quality assessment? My top tips for making sure that your quality assessments are working well. First one is ask the right questions, as we've just done. And you're welcome to get in touch with us if you're not sure about whether you are asking the right questions. Number 2 is train your teams on what to look for and do regular calibrations. You can have the best quality assessment in the world, but if you give it to someone who has their own very set opinions about something, they will judge your emails, your live chats, based on what they think is right, not what's written down in front of them. So make sure that they understand what to look for. And it's not always easy, as we've seen with things like active writing and empathy. Don't just give people a quality assessment and expect them to be able to just do it. And the other thing is do regular calibrations, because this is subjective at the end of the day. We're applying our opinions, even though we've got criteria. It's still, we're interpreting that. We're we're putting ourselves into it. So do regular calibrations to make sure that your whole team is looking at your live chats and emails in the same way. So that way you don't get someone who's being really harsh and someone who's being really positive. What we tend to do when we read something like a live chat or email or any writing really is we tend to see what's wrong with it rather than what's right. So it's easy for us to over criticize things. So do regular calibrations, make sure your quality team is all looking at things in the same way. And 3, use your instincts. Don't just rely on a scorecard can't really do all the work for you. It's just a guide. So don't rely on a scoring mechanism. My advice is read a live chat script or an email first of all, or a letter. Write down how it made you feel before you have time to think. So just get a note, make a note of whether you think it's maybe green, amber, red, or whatever your scoring system is, and then use your quality assessment to check back against that to make sure that those 2 things match up. So use your instincts. Okay, just one last thing before I go, and this has caused a lot of consternation and debate with our clients when it comes to quality assessment, is emojis. And it's definitely something to add in to your quality assessments. So it's particularly with live chat, I think people don't know what to do. Some people love them, some people hate them, and again it can really throw your scores out if you haven't thought about it. Got to think about your customers. What do they want? You've got to think about your brand. Is it right for your brand? My view on it is that if your customers are using them, it's good to use them back, particularly in positive scenarios where something good has happened, because if you don't use them it could look a little bit cold. I'd say don't go mad with them, and if you're in a serious discussion or something bad has happened, I'd avoid them. But that's just a general tip. You've got to decide what's right for your customers. So it'd be great to hear in the chat room what you guys think about emojis and live chat, and whether you've actually built this into quality or whether you have a sort of any guidance on it. So just to wrap up, I hope that's been helpful to you guys, and it's helped you to think about the way that you do quality assessment. I've got my email address here, so if any of you want any more tips on quality assessment, do let me know. If you'd like us to have a look at the way you do quality assessment, happy to do that. Also, we do live chat training and coaching if you're interested in that. And if you would like to see a good version of that email to Mrs. Hanley, not the robotic one, then let us know and I'll be happy to send that through as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed for that, Neil. Some real good food for thought there. I certainly particularly like the banning of non-apologies, because I certainly see a lot of we apologise for any inconvenience caused. And I think the use of the active voice is the, I was just thinking of, safety is our top concern. Sounds an awful lot more, standard than I've personally been around and checked 57 different points of this airplane, and I wouldn't fly it unless I was happy, and I'm happy. It conveys things in a very different, in a very different way. So certainly asking the right questions is very key. Well, let's have a look at the chat room. It's been absolutely flying through. We've got a whole range of different problems with quality assessments. Lisa says it's easy to sound cold on emails if you're just using a paragraph and not tailoring it to the customer. Claire says you can drive the wrong conversation on a call as too focused on being compliant rather than having needs. And quality assessments can be linked to internal measures rather than outcomes. So let's have a look at some of the tips. Here's an interesting one from Josh, who says, if you have a busy contact center, some people should monitor chat, some should monitor voice, and everyone should monitor email. Think of it as a Venn diagram. I've not come across this as a concept. Your thoughts, Sandy?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure what kind of resources would be required to monitor all of those channels, particularly in real time. But there are some nice systems out there that do some really good monitoring, and I think that's kind of the way to go now.
Indeed. Ellen says we have different quality assessment systems, or quality assessments for voice, written chat, social, as they all reflect the differences in tone, response length, and we hold joint calibration sessions with our clients to ensure we think quality is what the client wants. Neil, that ties in very much with your thoughts about tailoring the assessment.
Yeah, I think they should be different, but also the same. So different in that they are dealing with different channels. But if you want to give your customers a consistently good experience, then some of those things should be the same. So whether you're writing chats, it's social, speaking to a customer, if you want to show empathy, you should be looking for that across all of those. But I can understand that in practical terms, you do have to have some differences in the way that you quality assess those different channels. Yeah.
Michael has said on tone of voice, for all contact channels, your agent should be aware of your brand's tone of voice, the words to use, language, formality, etc. Whatever channel the customer comes through, they should feel like they're engaging with the brand. I guess this is one of the big differences, Neil, between being perhaps reflecting brand, but without being overly formal about it.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I agree with that. It's a good tip. So thanks, Michael. And that's a lot of what we do is we start with a brand tone of voice. So if you work for Virgin Airways, you're going to have a different voice than British Airways. I know that because I've worked for British Airways, and they really want to sound different. I think a tone of voice works well as a guide for people. It shouldn't inhibit their personality, and it shouldn't certainly make them feel like they have to sound formal. But as customers, we have different expectations from different brands, and that certainly includes the way that they write and speak to us. Yeah.
And Sandeep, I know you're going to be talking about knowledge bases later, but Ellen says have a knowledge base with standard responses for each contact or contract. Covers the usual FAQs. Agents can quickly copy these into the chat and then amend them to match the customer's exact query.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think knowledge bases it's very important to have a standard knowledge base. I actually take it one step further and say I think the same knowledge base should be used for chatbots as well as agents, because the information that's being presented in those should be consistent across all channels.
Indeed. We've got a question sent in by Claire, which is how do people tackle data protection, identification and verification on email? We want to do more in this area and meet the customer's needs. So if you're doing verification, it might be worthwhile if you could share that in the chat room, and we'll come back to that in a short while. And then the last tip of this section, and I think this is quite a nice one. Josh says, answer the question you're asked, not the question you want to answer. And I guess one of the big problems with things such as knowledge bases is that if there's a standard answer that's sort of kind of close to this and you want to rush through, it's easier to put that in than actually answering the question. So I think, yeah, that's a very good tip there. Right, we're going to jump into another poll, and we just talked briefly about knowledge base, and I know that Sandeep's going to be talking through that in a little bit. How would you rate the quality of the knowledge base in your contact center? Would you say it's very good, good, average, poor, or do you not have a knowledge base in your contact center? So if you'd just like to vote that, how would you rate the quality of your knowledge base? Very good, good, average, poor, or you don't have a knowledge base? I think we've got all the answers in now. So I'll just share this with you, and 14% very good, 35% good, 30% average, and 15% don't have a knowledge base. So I think if you add 5% poor, so I think that's saying if I added the 35 and the 14, that means only 49% of the audience would have a good knowledge base. Sandeep, any surprises there?
Not really. It's what we've kind of come across in our research, but it's not a good statistic.
No, indeed. So, Sandeep, I don't know if you want to share your ways that you think perhaps there's a way that technology can help with improving quality on digital channels.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for that, John T. And I just coming into my slide. So As Neil's kind of touched on, I'm going to kind of look at sort of the inefficiencies of email and the limitations of live chat. What we've seen in the contact center world is there's been a driver in the past to push the channel, so to shift the channels that the customers are contacting you on away from voice, and initially it used to be emails. Push them onto emails, it's more efficient. Push them onto chat, it's more efficient. But what we're finding actually is that there's now a sort of a realization in the industry that actually voice isn't the most inefficient channel, and particularly in some instances it would be the preferred channel. Interesting about the poll at the beginning where people were saying where the best quality comes from, and I think it's common knowledge that the best quality is coming from either voice, I guess, or live chat. So some of the points that we kind of look at is, when does voice beat email and chat? So one of the times is when you anticipate a lot of questions. If there's questions going back and forth, then email, because it's not a real-time channel, isn't an efficient channel. And an example actually we have is we had a housing association that had a web form to come into the contact center, and that web form would come into a structured email, but effectively that would initiate an email conversation going back and forth. They were finding that there was about 4 or 5 emails having to go back and forth over the period of about 3 or 4 days, sometimes 2 to 3 days. And that was just to start the process, actually. So we're having about 3 or 4 emails over a period of time just to start a process, and that's not in a very efficient way. What they did was they understood this, they realized this, and what they started to do was, in that web form, the initial web form, they had a mandatory field of a telephone number where they could be contacted, where the customer could be contacted on. And actually what they found was they were initiating the initial contact back with the customer on a voice call, and in a 30-second conversation they were getting to what a 3 or 4 emails would be, and in that 30 seconds it was very efficient. So that's an example where email isn't a very efficient channel. When you've got something complicated to explain, and that's an example where something is not as simple as just giving a simple sentence, where you've got a lot of information which needs to be gained after. Email isn't a very efficient channel. Live chat can be, but again, there's still nuances of going back and forth which can be lost from a voice call to a live chat. When you've taken too long to respond, sometimes the customer's expectation of a response is going to be in a call, because you can empathize with the caller because it's taken so long, and you wouldn't necessarily get that with an email. And then finally, when it's really important. So if there's something really important to cover, an email is seen sometimes as not being a personalized channel. So when it's really important, it is quite important to have voice calls for that. Moving that forward, just coming on to sort of the slide that we've just touched on, we talked about a knowledge base. Now, there's a lot of conversations in the industry, around chatbots, and everybody's kind of looking at the power of a chatbot and how they can sort of optimize the way in which they work and provide a more efficient service. Well, actually, the power of the chatbot comes from the knowledge base. So a chatbot can only do what you arm it or tell it to do with a knowledge base. And just looking at that poll, so people are thinking about chatbots and how ready they are. Well, actually, only 14% of people in this poll would say they have a very good knowledge base, and therefore the experience that they're going to be able to give with a chatbot is going to be obviously limited. Moving on, people say 30% of people are saying it's average, 5% saying poor. Again, a chatbot's going to be very inefficient, and it's not really going to give you what you need without that information. So a knowledge base is very important. It's required to leverage, obviously, efficiencies in the contact center. Another point that I was just making is it's very important to have the same knowledge base being used by agents as well as bots. And the reason for that is the bots can actually push back the information of what kind of queries are being put into the contact center by customers. So if there's a common theme coming into the contact center from a chatbot, then that information can be kind of put at the top of the knowledge base for when an agent is presented with an incoming interaction. So as soon as they get a customer call or a query come in, at the knowledge base, you've got the most frequently asked questions at the top, and that's going to help drive efficiencies from the agent's perspective by using that knowledge base and leveraging that. And then another theme just to kind of bear in mind is predictive analytics, and this is kind of looking at some of the other channels. So where you've got the inefficiencies of email and understanding how many emails it's taking your agents and how long it's taking your agents to get to different stages within the query, by using the analytics available to you, you're able to get that clear understanding. But then also using that information or using that data in a more intelligent way by saying, actually, what we want to do is understand what were the past solutions and use those to address upcoming problems. So we understand when we have issues within the contact center, we are able to resolve those. So moving forward, if you've got any issues that you're aware of that will be coming up, you may be able to preempt those by using the analytics. So it's very important to get your data to work for you. And actually, in an ideal world, you're going to be using that predictive analytics to help answer the questions of what's going to happen and when before it actually happens. And an example there is a customer who had loads of interactions coming in through a chat bot and through the website. And what they're finding is it was very, very common for some basic queries to be asked around availability of service. When is the service going to be available? In what form? And so by using that data from the actual chatbot, they were able to make a change on their website where they actually signposted just on the first page of the website, availability of service. This is when the service is going to be available. This is how you can contact us. And actually, did you know that it's more efficient to contact us, or we'll be able to deal with a query more efficiently by using web chat or by using the phone, rather than emailing us and expecting us to be able to handle that as a channel. So those are the kind of themes that we kind of see as quite important there. So and it all kind of links in with the analytics, because what you're able to do is constantly look at the streams of incoming interactions and able to analyze how efficient they are and how quickly you're able to deal with the customer queries, to be able to then kind of move forward and predict what you're going to be able to do in the future. So that kind of completes the presentation. And again, you know, the focus at Puzzle is solving customer interactions. And similarly, we've got the ability to contact us through a number of different channels. We're going to be at an expo next week as well. So if you've got any questions about what we've covered today beyond sort of the webinar, please feel free to contact us at the expo and visit the website, which is puzzle.com. And just note it's puzzle with an EL, not LE.
Okay, Sandeep, thank you very much indeed for that. Some very good bits of advice there, particularly, you know, if you're going to use digital channels, try and make it the speed of response better, which would then potentially improve the quality on it. Certainly improve the quality of your knowledge base and use the same knowledge base for both agents and for chatbots. And one of the big things, in your past interactions, there is a wealth of solutions that you've had to customer problems, often which just stay in those emails and in those live chats. And if you can get those back into the knowledge base, very, very powerful at being able to predict how that can apply to the front. So let's have a look at some of the top tips and questions coming in. Claire has said, when replying to a customer, look at what, who they are and what they have done, rather than necessarily just on that digital interaction. So look at some of the history. I think that ties in very well. Sandeep, Ellen says, we use speech and type or text analytics within our contact center to pick up on the keywords and tones across live chat and voice, which very much echoes into your discussion about predictive analytics.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, there's some really powerful tools out there. So in the past, there would have been sort of a simple solution which would have just looked at what words were being said, but actually context, and by using phonetics, understanding the tone at which things are being said is very important. Because I could very simply say, I'm not happy, and the contact center solution or the analytics system might pick up happy and say, okay, great, the customer's happy. Whereas understanding sort of the context of that and the tone at which that's being said is very important.
And it says, we currently use chatbots to answer the first few very basic queries, and then auto dial into an agent when it's not in the knowledge base. So Neil, that sounds like a combination of chatbot and a live agent. Sometimes, if you're pretending to be an agent, that can sometimes you can be caught out on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the key is, and this might sound odd given what I do, but to a customer, they don't care if it's a chatbot or a human, because a human can give a robotic experience and a chatbot can give a human experience. It's all about the way that you deliver that. And I think, to Ellen's point, which is a really good one, I think it's the way that a lot of contact centers do it and should do it now, is it should feel fairly seamless. You shouldn't feel like this big jump when you go from chatbot to human being. So yeah, I think for me that's the key to it. It's giving them that seamless experience, and you do that through, whether it's a chatbot or a human, you do that through tone and language. Yeah,
and some of the experience I see is best practice is if you're speaking to a chatbot, make it fairly obvious that it is a bot.
Yes,
don't pretend that bot is a person, and you say, actually, so I'm the robot, I can't answer this, but I'm going to go off and find someone who can answer that for you, and then they know that they're speaking to a real person. Rosa said that voice is very hard to portray via email. Calling the customer back allows the customer to hear empathy and a sense that we care about the issue. Certainly, email is very good if it's a preferred channel, but the golden rule I've often found is if it gets to the second email, don't send a third. Try and deflect it onto another channel. Abby says we ask whether the call, email, live chat was memorable and personalized. Neil, is that sort of the right question to ask?
Definitely. I like that word, memorable, because memorable means it wasn't standardized, and personalized, definitely, that is generally something that only real people can do. The rest, it can be a template, but you've just got to drop in that specific detail that your customers told you. Maybe it's about how they felt or how what their experience was. Personalizing it, definitely. Yeah,
Rose also talks about channel shift of we outbound call customers that sound as if they may contact us back after our reply, or for any dissatisfaction to ensure we can resolve the issue for the customer and agree a resolution. Emailing a complaint to customer back, if someone complains, emailing back can tend to aggravate them. Got a long one here from La, who says, quality forms are typically a mix of hygiene, i.e. branded, opening, closing, compliance, data protection act, customer experience. I've certainly seen lots of ones like this. Sadly, it's still a tick box exercise in most contact centers. Questions in the quality form, even the quality score itself, do not even correlate to customer experience and compliance measures. Ideally, the quality process needs to be both descriptive and predictive of customer experience and compliance performance. So it goes back to the business organizations not really understanding and acting on the true drivers of customer satisfaction and loyalty. I think that both sums up both what you, Neil, and Sandeep have been saying in your presentations there. And one final question, we've got loads more in the chat room. Jackie says, when addressing a group of people in a notification, is it okay to say we apologize for any inconvenience caused? I hate it personally, but not sure what to say instead. I think, Neil, you weren't a fan of this one.
No. Well, when we're on the receiving end, I don't think anyone's a fan of it. We just have to see it like that. So first, tips are, one, try and say I rather than we. You can generally say I, even if it's on behalf of the company. Use the word sorry, not apologize. If you think about when you're talking to someone on the phone, you instinctively say sorry, not apologize. And just avoid that word any, because if you know that there is some inconvenience caused, then say the, and pick up a word that they've used. So if they said inconvenient, then great, but people don't really say that. They'll say frustration or problem. So say the problem or the frustration. And then finally, with caused, who caused it? That we caused you. So I'm sorry for the frustration or the problem, we caused you. It would be better, in my view.
So quite a subtle change, but the language really does make a difference.
Yeah. Just one more point here. Try not to be generic. So just apologise. Pick up on what the customer's told you and apologise for that thing.
So if in the chat box you can say in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? Today's winning tip was the one that came in from Josh, which is in digital channels, answer the question you're asked, not the one that you want to answer. If you'd like to complete the survey when you leave our webinar, it's only 4 questions long. And if you would like a demonstration of the Puzzle predictive analytics software, you can fill that in the box on the webinar survey. I'm sure Sandeep will be only too happy to arrange that for you. The replay will probably be available later on this afternoon. We'll be sending out an email with all those details. And we're back at 1 o'clock today when we're looking at the secrets of workforce management. So just like to thank our speakers on this session. Neil Martin from the First World, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And Sandeep Bogan from Puzzle, thank you for joining us as well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And thank you to everyone in the audience, and we'll be back at 1 o'clock in an hour and a half for our next session on the secrets of WFM. Thank you then. Bye-bye.